Hello friends and happy Mer May! So today we are going to be making a gorgeous overlay in the 1920s style to go over that slip from last time. As I said before in the last video where I make the slip for this dress, I really wanted this to be as historically accurate as it could be, even though I'm of course using modern synthetic fabrics that aren't very on par with what would have been done in the 1920s. Although it is velvet and it is organza and it has metallic thread through it, and all three of those things separately were very common in the 1920s. This fabric just combines all three of them, and I feel like I should get bonus points for that.
So when my sister-in-law gave me this fabric, I immediately knew what I wanted to do with it. I just kept seeing in my head this 1920s mermaid. I haven't really draped very much, and I haven't really played around in the 1920s very much either, so I did a really good chunk of research, and then I took to my dress form and spent probably a good 3 hours just playing around with shapes. When draping, it is really important to take your time and make sure that you are completely happy with everything. You can always just unpin something and try again, but once you start, actually cutting things out, you've made some decisions and you're gonna have to stick with them. So be really, really sure that you like what you've got going on before pulling your scissors out. My friend Melody always called this part freeing the neckline. It just sounds so romantic that way. All I'm doing here is just double and triple checking to make sure that my sleeve is exactly the length that I want it, marking that with a pin so that I can cut it accurately, or as accurate as my cat will allow me. My camera angle doesn't show it very well, but I'm only cutting 18 inches down, and then I am going to cut that out as a square, so there will be a huge right angle there. This will allow me to tie a fancy knot on my hip. Later on, I'm going to trim my edges at the bottom to make this tie a little bit easier to tie.
So I just did a procrastination vacuum, and I realized two things. First, I'm going to want to lower this neckline quite a bit more, because my original... Hello, kitty. Because my original design was very deep plunging and slouch. First off, I'm going to want to deepen my V. This is period accurate, and often I have seen dresses where the opera neckline slip dress was showing underneath, and I like the looks of that. Secondly, I lined up this branch really nicely, and I'm really proud of that. Third, this is all hand sewing. I just realized that this is entirely hand sewing. The neckline is going to be by hand, setting the knot will be by hand, this seam will be by hand, this edging will be by hand, the hem will be by hand, the stay stitching over here will be by hand, and this hem will be by hand. And then this extra piece that I'm going to tack on here under the knot for more volume will also be edge stitched by hand, which is a lot. This is the first exclusively by hand thing I've ever sewn. I didn't think that the day would come, but here we are. Which is nice, because I have like a month to work on this. I don't know that I'm going to do any more work on this today, except for maybe doing the edge stitching on this handkerchief, because I know for sure that I want that for under the hem, or for under this knot. And everything else I really haven't made up my mind about yet, so I think I'm going to sit on it for a day. And I have a backlog now, so I can sit on it for a day. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna need to be really quiet because everyone in my house is asleep. Also, welcome to day 2 of me actually getting dressed. Crazy. All of this is hand sewing.
As I said before, almost this entire project is hand sewing, and a vast majority of it is just these teeny tiny little rolled hems. I normally do a roll hem by rolling it in between my thumb and my forefinger and then stitching the edge down, but I really wanted to try out this method, and I didn't really like it as much. I found it to be really fiddly and it slowed me down, probably because I'm not very good at it yet. Any edge of my fabric that had a selvage like this, I just use a running stitch to tack down because I didn't see much of a reason to finish that edge with too much care because it was already finished by the manufacturers. And since this turned into such a time-intensive project and I had other things to do, I wanted to save as much of my time as I could. That being said, I really did enjoy all of the hand stitching, and I'm going to have to find an excuse to do some more. This little clip is interesting. Doing a rolled hem as a corner is not something that I had ever done before. I basically just started it the same way that I would for any edge, and it was just fine. I did have to go back and tack it down a little bit carefully because it didn't quite roll the way I wanted it to, but some of that I think has to do with my actual fabric that I was using, because the velvet and the chiffon have very different thicknesses, and that caused my rolls to be a little bit funky at times. One of my favorite parts of this project was definitely setting these little pleats in the shoulder. Originally I was only going to pleat one shoulder, but then I decided that that looked kind of silly, and I pleated both of them. Basically, I folded my fabric one little fold at a time and made sure it was laying exactly how I wanted it to, and then I pinned that in place. Once all my pins are in place how I want them to be and all of my little rolls are perfect, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tack each one down. When tacking, I like to find like the apex of a knot or a wrinkle and make sure that I have that stuck in place really, really well, instead of following my curves all the way down. So you'll see here, I'm doing the very top of my shoulder with some little tacking stitches, but I'm not tacking down my wrinkles all the way down the front and back of the garment. I'm just sticking them in place and trusting the fabric to continue to drape the way that I want it to. I know I'm not the only one that feels really, really terrified when they're deepening necklines. You'll see here that I've left a little bit of a slit at the base of my neckline. This will allow me to roll the edges a little bit easier. No surprises here, I finished my neckline with a rolled hem, just like the rest of my garment. As you can see, I only tried to learn a new technique for the first half of this project, and then old habits, they kicked in pretty hardcore. I will say though, my usual method of folding or rolling my hem and then tacking it down was a lot easier with this fabric because the dual thicknesses responded way better to being physically rolled than being rolled by the thread.
This is taking a lot longer than I originally thought it was going to. I don't know why I thought this would be so fast. So this is now a third day of me working on this, and I really thought I would get it done in 2, but that's fine. I think that this side is probably going to take the longest, just because there is so much space that needs hemmed here. And then of course there is the actual hem that needs hemmed, and I still need to do a running stitch to connect the side. I've marked that and then taken my pins out like 4 times now. I will say, I think that the shoulders took a very long time, because after I laid my pleats, I then ruched them with some running stitches and made sure that they were laying really, really nicely. I think this will turn out really nice still. I've given up my dream of beading it. I've given up my dream of hand beading it, at least for now. I might come back to this and add some beads. For now, this is what we're doing.
I wound up doing a back stitch instead of a running stitch because this is technically a construction seam and I wanted to do it the right way so that I wouldn't unpick it and go back and do it differently later. In the end, I was really happy with the way it turned out. One thing I wasn't happy with was how thick my ties were, so I went in and I cut this little curve out. This way I still had a good amount of volume at the bottom, but my ties were skinnier so that I could tie a better knot with them. I was able to do this edge with a rolled hem as well. It just took a lot of finagling, especially at the very tip. Unfortunately, I am really bad at lining up my shots, so most of the footage wasn't actually usable. Sorry. But basically, the thought behind my method was to finagle everything as much as possible and get it tacked down with my fingers exactly where I wanted my fabric to lay, and then put a stitch in place. Basically, as long as you refuse to be done with something until it looks perfect and then make your stitch permanent, it'll look really good in the end. Stubbornness is basically my secret. Once all of my stitches were done, it was time to line up my fancy little bonus panel and pin it in place. I decided to use a brooch pin to put it in place so that I could always remove it if I wanted less volume. The only step left was to celebrate and give myself a hug for all my hard work.
Now, wasn't that fun? I had fun filming it, so I hope you had fun watching it. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like so that more people like you can see it. And if you would like to see more from me, obviously, you can hit the subscribe button so we can stay in touch. Hello, Zelinka. Anyway, like I said, I'm doing a theme month for the month of May, and it would be a real shame if you missed any of it. That's all I got. Until next time, I'll see you later, friends. Bye! And were very common in the 1920s. This fabric just combines. This fabric just combines all three of them, and I feel like I should get bonus points for that. Cat, do not knock my makeup brushes off. Come on. You are a menace.